it came out of the attacks on Corbyn and McDonnell, really. And we were just gobsmacked about this wave of hysteria about rising anti-Semitism, and the left is all anti-Semitic, and it always has been, but now it's really coming to the fore. And we were thinking, where is all this coming from? It's just completely untrue.
There'd been an effort about 10 years ago to launch a definition of anti-Semitism through what became known as the EUMC definition. EUMC is the European Union Monitoring Committee on Racism and Xenophobia. It's never quite clear why they had that project in the first place. There was no project to define anti-black racism or any other form of racism. National Union of Students adopted it. They're under a very clear Blairite New Labour leadership at the time. But no one else did. And we thought it had died.
So we just held an informal sort of meeting of people from various Jewish organisations and decided on a name, Free Speech on Israel, and just decided to start pulling together statements, really, and letters. Could we mobilise letters on this to the media? Could we get articles written? Could we produce some material that would be useful to others? And it started off with just tatty little leaflets and so on. And then the website, and then the Facebook page, and then the Twitter feed, and it really took off.
Now, one thing Israel had been trying to talk about, they'd used the language of delegitimization.
Officials and experts and increasingly leading Jewish figures are adopting a discourse perceived as delegitimizing Israel.
Across the world, the new anti-Semites rally behind the boycott, disinvestment and sanctions campaign, the BDS campaign. And the people behind it have the temerity to compare Israel with apartheid South Africa.
All good people should oppose this particular effort to delegitimize and to demonize Israel.
But they could never deal with our counter-argument, which was that it's not us who are delegitimizing Israel, it's Israel's crimes that are delegitimizing Israel. And they went back to the EUMC definition, tweaked it very slightly, and there's a few words different, and launched it through something called the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Important body because the Holocaust is an absolutely fundamental part of Jewish experience and a fundamentally important part of European history. So it's not bad the IHRA exists and that children are taught about the Holocaust. But then it becomes wrapped up into allowing the Holocaust to justify the existence of Israel in its present state.
So there is this broad group which involves people from the Jewish Socialist Group, independent Jewish voices on the periphery, Jews for Boycotting Israeli Goods, International Jewish Anti-Zionist Network, and occasionally a bit of input from sort of floaters, Judas and Young Jewish Left and so on. It's been very productive because people who would not normally have worked in the same area have come together very productively. So, for example, the Chakrabarti report, when we heard that Jeremy Corbyn had decided that he needed to be seen to be doing something about the alleged anti-Semitism, he appointed Shami Chakrabarti, former head of Liberty, to run this commission, and we thought this is very good. One of the vice chairs was David Feldman, who heads up the Pears Institute for the study of anti-Semitism. He's a very sane guy. He knows that you don't include sort of reference to a state in your definition of what a form of racism.
There was this push, which also corresponds to the time when Mark Regev, who is a nasty but highly effective Israel propagandist, became Israel's ambassador to the UK. And there was a more general attack upon Jeremy Corbyn, who has a history of supporting Palestine. Therefore, many of Corbyn's supporters had been active in the Palestine support movement, and there was a trawl done of everybody's Twitter and Facebook posts to find out that anything in a certain light, from a certain angle, if you're standing your head, could be linked to anti-Semitism. That trawl of Facebook and Twitter is a non-trivial exercise and was beyond the resources of most groups. It may well have been executed by people sitting at their computers in the UK, but it was orchestrated from Tel Aviv. Now that's anti-Semitic because it's about Jewish conspiracies and so on, but it's part of state policy. It's Israeli state policy.
We did approach the Equalities Committee of the Labour Party because the Jewish Labour Movement, a Zionist organisation, has been pushing this anti-Semitism is rampant, the left is rife with Jew hatred line in the Labour Party so successfully that when it came to discussing the results of the Chakrabarti report, the JLM were invited to attend the Equalities Committee, which is a committee of the National Executive Committee, to discuss how to implement or whether to implement Chakrabarti's recommendations. We wrote in as Free Speech on Israel. We got the name of the chair of the committee, Keith Birch, a Unison bureaucrat, and basically were told, well, of course we won't be listening only to one strand of Jewish opinion. So we thought, great. We've never been called, our opinion has never been invited at all.
A few months ago, Theresa May announced that this misdefinition of anti-Semitism, which has things in it like denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, e.g. by claiming that the existence of the State of Israel is a racist endeavour, is anti-Semitic.
In response to the work of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, Britain will be adopting a formal definition of anti-Semitism. Just last week, we were at the forefront to try to ensure that the definition was adopted across the continent too.
It's about recognising that words like Zionism and some attacks on Israeli people are just a thin disguise for anti-Semitism.
The Zionists have just been very, very fortunate that they've been able to push their definition of anti-Semitism at a time when it was useful to people who don't give a monkeys about any form of racism, least of all anti-Semitism, don't care about Israel-Palestine, but hey, this is a really useful stick. And you can see the effect on the Labour Party. It's been absolutely devastating.
Two particular hate figures were set up by this campaign. Malia had been elected as president of the National Union of Students.
Do you have a problem with Israel per se?
I have a problem with Israel violating international law and its continued treatment of the Palestinian people, certainly.
And the other one was Jackie Walker, who was an activist within Momentum.
You could not get somebody who feels stronger against racism than Jeremy Corbyn. But you had organisations like the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism have posted up 78 articles where they suggest, more than suggest, that Jeremy Corbyn is an anti-Semite.
Now both of these are women of colour, which is not insignificant, and campaigns have been running against them ever since, but against all sorts of other people as well. And that's the context of free speech on Israel.
We can get a letter in The Guardian, because The Guardian's comment is free, pages are completely closed to us. Even someone like Jackie Walker, who's been personally attacked and vilified in the pages of that newspaper and across the media, she has offered to write op-eds for them, and they've said, "Oh, we're not planning to cover this at the moment." I mean, it's just absolutely blatant. You can see the list of contributors have included Mark Regev, the Israeli ambassador, who was invited to write about the Battle of Cable Street, for heaven's sake, in which he pretty well aligned the British Union of Fascists with modern-day Palestine solidarity movements. We asked for the right to respond to this. We've got good writers among us, no interest whatsoever, not even an answer.
Interestingly, when the House of Commons Home Affairs Select Committee looked at definitions of anti-Semitism, and this was not a body that was at all friendly to critics of Israel. They wanted to put caveats on 3 of the most outrageous statements, unless there is clear anti-Semitic intent. The government refused to accept those caveats, and they have since been enjoining all local authorities and all sorts of other people to adopt this definition.
Now that The London Assembly has passed a resolution moved by a member of Labour Friends of Israel, who denies the existence of Palestine, by the way, Andrew Dismore, you look on his Twitter feed. They passed this resolution from him, which has been pushed all over the country by Labour Friends of Israel and others, to say that anti-Semitism is now covered by this new definition, with examples which include criticism of the state of Israel, its foundation, its racist origins and so on. Can't say any of that. They passed it on the nod, and we challenged that. We sent statements to every single member of the Assembly. We sent them again because they didn't answer. And the answers have started to come back, and it's all, well, we accept that the resolution that was put to us represents the view of most Jews.
The latest instantiation is Joe Johnson, who is the Minister for Higher Education, wrote to Universities UK to request, demand, insist all universities pay attention to the IHRA definition. Now that would have been bad enough, but he then tied that to Israel Apartheid Week. Now Israel Apartheid Week is an annual event held in I don't know how many countries now, worldwide, which is a campus-based to get students to look at the nature of the Israeli state and to talk about how Palestinians survive or don't survive under Israeli oppression. By linking Israeli Apartheid Week to the definition, it invited universities to assume that anything going under the banner of IAW was, by definition, anti-Semitic.
We have been deliberately suppressed. So when we write a letter with 100 or more signatures, famous Jews like Mike Rosen, Mike Lee, Miriam Margolyes signing up, the next letter that's printed is from Gideon Falter, chair of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, denouncing these people as fringe Jews whose opinions are rejected by the mainstream Jewish community.
One thing that's been a commonplace of IAW is to have mock checkpoints on campuses, to try to show to students what the daily life of Palestinians are when they try to go about their normal daily business. Seems to be an entirely reasonable thing to do as an educational tool about what the life of Palestinians are. And how running a checkpoint in these terms is anti-Semitic escapes me.
Remember that this all takes place in an atmosphere of a shift to the right in this country and across Europe. Jeremy Corbyn is a threat. So people from the Blairite to the far right, they've been very happy to use this weapon of anti-Semitism.
Also, the universities have been linking IAW and the IHRA to the PREVENT strategy, to make an assumption that anyone speaking on Palestine is promoting terrorism unless they can prove otherwise. So anyone speaking on Palestine on many campuses has to put their name in 2 weeks ahead, has to be vetted, and may or may not be allowed to speak. And these are the sorts of things that Free Speech on Israel sees its mission to contest.